Good morning, everyone. Let me just launch my presentation. Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to present at the International Colloquium of Gerpisa. My name is Angelo Moro. I am a PhD student in sociology at the University of Bourgogne in France, and the work I'm presenting today is done in collaboration with my colleague Enrica Virgillito of the Institute of Economics at the Sant'Anna School of Advanced Studies. The aim of our study is to investigate the responses from trade union to the introduction of techno-organisational innovations linked to the so-called Industry 4.0 in the automotive sector in Italy. We try to develop a sort of techno-organisational perspective in which we try to study the interplay between new technologies and the organizational context in which those technologies are implemented. A recent and ongoing debate has shown, especially in the automotive sector, digitalization could be seen as a sort of lean augmentation in which E4.0 technology are used somehow to strengthen the lean principle already existing in the production system. But we already know that lean production systems are also characterized by a dynamic of divergence, and that the actual implementation of the principle of lean production can give birth to a variety of workplace organizational models that depend on different variables. So we expect to find a variety of digital lean systems within the automotive sector in Italy. And from the perspective that is of interest for us today, the research question is, how does this variety shape human action at workplace level, and conversely, if and how does human action in the workplace contribute to shape this variety? And we will focus in particular on the action of trade union representative from a particular trade union, the FEOM CGL, which is one of the main Italian trade union for metal workers, and I will explain why in a few slides. I will go very fast on the debate on E4.0 and work. We can discuss about it in our online discussion. But as you know, there has been a long debate on the consequences of Industry 4.0 on work and employment, both in terms of the consequences of automation, the consequences in terms of skill requirements, and also the consequences in terms of working conditions. It seems to us that a question that has been somehow under-investigated is that of the role and agency for workers to shape this implementation of new technology. And in 2016, Edwards and Ramirez somehow reminded the scientific community that workers can have the power to reconstitute technological artifacts in order to subvert potential negative effects, but should also somehow engage in the process and design of technologies. There has been recent research that has highlighted the role of trade unions in shaping the implementation of E4.0. There has been research in Germany with regard to the project by 2020. There has been also a very interesting research that compares technological implementation in Norway and the UK in the food and drinking processing, that has shown the role both of national institutions, but also of workplace action and power relation at the workplace level in the shaping of the process of implementation of new technology. For what concerns the case of Italy, digitalization has been seen as bringing somehow more challenges and opportunities for the unions for some historical reason. First, because the Italian industrial relations system has historically lacked the regulation and bargaining with regards to new technologies, but also for present conditions and challenges that arise from the actual context of industrial relations, in which trade unions are more and more marginalized, at least with COVID, and collective bargaining is under pressure, and there are ecological division between unions, etc. But at the same time, some scattered evidence has shown that there are new spaces of action for trade unions, and especially that some unions have tried to adopt some innovative and experimental practices in order to oppose, react to, negotiate the consequences of technological innovation. And this has been found in many different sectors, from platform economy, gig workers, to the manufacturing sector and more traditional sectors. So based on this literature, we try to develop an analytical framework in which we try to understand trade union strategies by analyzing several sets of factors, from firm-specific factors like structural one, ownership structure, product attributes, economic performances, employment dynamics, and especially the more recent patterns of technological innovation processes that have been the focus of our research in the last 2 years. And also socio-political factors such as the managerial orientation for trade unions. Then we also take into consideration the role of more institutional factor, and especially the presence of channels of voice and of the institutionalized system of work-based industrial relations. And finally, we try to highlight the role played by human power resources, and especially of internal solidarity, infrastructure resources, and narrative resources. So we try to apply this analytical framework to materials that come from 2 different research projects, which were conducted by a very heterogeneous group of academics and researchers coming from different universities in Italy, in collaboration with the metal working union FIOM-CGIL. That's why we're going to focus on the action of FIOM-CGIL representatives. And those 2 projects, the first one was called Emilia Romagna 4.0, and had the purpose of understanding the effects of technological innovations on work organization in some highly innovative factories in the Emilia Romagna region, which is one of the Italian region with the most important manufacturing tradition. And the other project was called FCA H&H working condition, and had the aim of questioning the consequences of the introduction of work-class manufacturing on working condition in the factory of the now Stellantis and FCA H&H group in Italy. Those two research projects shared somehow a common design and a common methodology, in which they were both based on case analysis of different factories, and they were characterized by an extensive use of semi-structured interviews, especially with the core workers. They had a common analytical focus, which was based on the organizational work, central organizational work at shop floor level, and also they allowed, let's say, a complementary use of field materials, because they allow to investigate in a common temporal windows between 2017 and 2018, so before COVID, some of the most important factories in the automotive sector in Italy. So our research design was aimed at selecting cases among those 24 analyzed in these 2 projects, selecting cases in order to allow us to perform comparison across companies, across plants within the same company, but also across product categories. So we came up with the decision of selecting 8 cases of final assembly plants, so plants located at the same point, let's say, in the respective value chain. And so we selected 3 plants located from the first research. We selected 3 plants located in the outskirts of the city of Bologna. I will come later to the role of peculiar local trade union tradition in shaping industrial relations. But those 3 plants were Cesare, Toyota, Ducati, and Lamborghini. And then we selected also 5 plants belonging to the former FCA H&H group: Agar Cugliasco, Mirafiori, Cassino, Pugliano, and Zebelatessa. Those 5 factories located basically all across Italy, both south and north. So in total, we analyzed 92 interviews that were analyzed according to a specific 3-layer code system, and also based on the information gathered in these interviews, we tried to map the technological innovation and organizational practices in each of these plants. And this is somehow the table that shows the results of this mapping activity. I don't have the time to go into the details of this. We can discuss it in our online discussion, but in any case, what we found very briefly is that there is common trend towards the adoption of E4.0 artifacts, but this process of adoption is somehow differentiated among our cases. So there are cases in which it's more limited, in cases in which this adoption has gone further on and has been more intensive. And the same could be said about some organizational practices linked to production, such as the team organization, the Kaizen, job rotation, etc., which are more or less implemented in every class, but at different levels. And this has, of course, consequences on what we are trying to discuss today. So coming to the analytical part of our framework, as I was saying, our cases differs in terms of structural features. They differ in terms of product attributes, even if somehow this dimension intersects the dimension of ownership structure, because we have cases such as Lamborghini and Ducati that belongs to the Audi Volkswagen groups and that produce for a very niche market like luxury car for Lamborghini case and premium motorbikes for Ducati case. But for instance, we have also the plants belonging to the FCA CNH group that actually do not only produce for the mass market, but also produce for the luxury market, such as in the case of the Maserati brand, and also some premium vehicles that are produced within the Alfa Romeo brand. And finally, we have also factories that produce commercial vehicles, which are several in the case of the FCA group, and of course the case of Sesam Toyota. Our cases differ greatly in terms of economic performances, employment dynamics, and workforce composition. Once again, I can go into the detail of this, but just if you see the graph in the right downside of the screen, you see that workforce composition and salary dynamics are very different between the Lamborghini and Ducati cases and the SCA cases, and also the SCA economic performance in terms of profitability and sales has become to go in a crisis dynamic way before the COVID-19 in 2020, but we can discuss about it in our discussion. And what I wanted to highlight is that our firms particularly differ in terms of techno-organizational innovation processes, and this is what we have tried to show in our previous work that we presented also last year at Gerpisa Colloquium. For instance, our analysis has shown that there are patterns of convergence among our cases towards a common digital lead model in which we find somehow an integration between lean production paradigm and digitalization, which seem to be oriented toward work intensification and the fostering of technical control and work operation. But also we found the relevance of the role played by heterogeneity at the plant level and also by social conditions that are due to managerial orientation and corporate culture. And especially we found a polarization dynamics with respect to working condition and employee empowerment between a low road that seeks competitiveness through the elimination of low value added phases in a way that disempowers workers, and also on the other side an high road but for a narrow niche of workers toward in which somehow the firms use techno-organisational innovation with the aim of increasing, of course, profitability of firms, but also in a way that does not disempower workers, it actually tries to use their tacit knowledge and to extract it. And in this polarized dynamics, the Sesam Toyota case is located some way between the two poles. The first pole of the low road being represented especially by the FCA plants, and the high road pole being represented especially by Ducati and Lamborghini plants. Managerial orientation toward trade unions also differ a lot among our cases. In the Toyota case, as it is well known, the literature, the approach depends on how unions conduct themselves, if they embrace or not the Toyota ways, and the risk of being marginalized and disconnected to this approach. In Volkswagen cases, also abroad, somehow the particular Volkswagen corporate culture somehow applies also in context in which co-determination is in which the setting of co-determination is not in place, such as Italy, but still the Volkswagen corporate culture recognized that capital and labor have different interests, and somehow the fact of acknowledging these differences contribute to create the foundation of cooperation between unions and management based on mutual trust. And finally, in the FCA group, trade union participation is not excluded, but is somehow very in a subaltern position because the trade unions are assigned only informative and at most propositional tasks, but not at all co-decisional, and in particular, work organization is never at the center of negotiation. There are also differences that concern firm-level institutional factor, and especially the presence of voice channels available to these FION-CGL representatives, and those depends in particular on the specific local trade union tradition and firm's system of investor relations, as I will try to show. In these cases, the difference are found especially between our cases located in the Romagna region and the cases belonging to the FCA group, because in the first case, in this region, which is a particular one in Italian political context, and in a region in which this particular trade union has a very strong position, and it has been able to negotiate since the 90s the formation of work-based technical bilateral commission on different topics, such as work organization, for instance. And so within the three firms analyzed, here, these technical bilateral commission are established and are composed by trade union delegates and company representatives, and represent like a place in which trade unions can have not only informative and consultative role, but also in some cases propositional role for what concerns work organization. On the contrary, in the FCA cases, since the implementation of work-class manufacturing at the beginning of the last decade, the system of industrial relations has been somehow dual, and work union representation is differentiated between the unions that had signed the specific company agreements and the union that did not sign it. So the first unions that have signed it are allowed to participate in the system of joint committees on different topics that is in place within the FCA factory, former FCA factories. But on the contrary, representatives from the trade unions, such as that did not sign this agreement, are not allowed to participate. These has consequences in terms of union power resources, and once again, the distinction is here between factories located in the Emilia-Romagna region and factories belonging to the FCA group. In first cases, FION-CGL is the majority union and has the majority of the representative in every case, and as also its representative have also a very large amount of paid time release and enjoy a full freedom of movement within the plants, while on the contrary, in the factories belonging to the former FCA group, FION-CGL is not the majority union, and since it has not signed the company-specific collective agreement, FION-CGL representatives are only granted the amount of paid time release provided for by law, so it is only 8 hours per month. And actually, from the interviews, it emerged that middle management actively tries to restrict freedom of movement of these trade union representatives. So, what consequences this different set of factors have in terms of shaping trade unions responsive in the face of techno-organisational innovation and digitalization? So, I would just say that I will present this trade union responses in 3 slides, each one corresponding to the 3 different big companies that we analyze here. So the 2 factories belonging to Volkswagen, the 1 factory belonging to Toyota, and the 5 factories belonging to FCA. But this presentation is only a synthetic way to present our results, and the difference can be found also among plants belonging to the same ownership structure. But once again, we can discuss about it in our online discussion. Coming to the trade union responses in the 2 Volkswagen cases, so Lamborghini and Ducati, trade union seems to play a little role in the designing phase, but have been rather pivotal in promoting investment plans that involve technological upgrading and development of new products, and also they are playing a very important role in counteracting the negative effects of the adoption of new technologies in terms of control over workers. For what concerns working condition organizational change, trade unions had a lower bargaining power when it came to contrast the tendencies toward work intensification that are present also in these factories, even if not at a very high level. But on the other side, trade unions have played a more significant role in influencing organizational change. For instance, in evaluating work improvement proposal, in implementing economic solution, or in negotiating, for instance, work shifts, etc. And they've also played a very important role in the training of workers. For instance, they've been able to, they've played a very important role in the introduction of a new system of job training, and they've also been able to obtain the formal recognition of educational achievements for workers. This is absolutely the case. The situation is slightly different in the sense that the trade unions seem to be in a more marginal position and less able to play a proactive role in promoting investment plans and influencing implementation of new technologies. But at the same time, trade union representatives seem to be keen to obtain greater recognition from management, especially by claiming those value of participation and involvement of the Toyota way. So we will see how this will go in the future. But for now, trade unions have also seem also to play a limited or at least a more limited role in influencing organizational change. There have been many examples of bargaining connected to organizational work, but they are limited, for instance, to the demand of increasing the number of employees on a line or a department, for example. And workers also have began to recognize a certain ineffectiveness of union action with respect to work intensification and working conditions. And also this role, this limited role of trade union, we can find it also for what concerns skills and training. For instance, trade union has been able to negotiate periodical technical training for blue-collar workers, but this training is conducted only outside working hours, and so of course it does not give many incentives to workers to participate in this. I'm sorry, someone interrupted me. To participate in this training. Finally, coming to trade union responses in ex-FCA plans. As I said, the situation is quite different, especially for female CGL representatives that are excluded from institutionalized bargaining relationships and from this participatory commission system. And as a consequence, their action is very marginal, both for what concerns the bargaining of investment plans and implementation of new technology, but also for what concerns the negotiation of training plans aimed at preventing the potential de-skilling effect relating to new technologies. As a consequence, the trade union action of female CGL representative is focused especially on the action of counteracting the consequences of techno-organisational change, especially in terms of work intensification and worsening of working condition. And their industrial action mainly takes the form of micro-negotiation and micro-conflict at the shop floor level. And those micro-negotiation and micro-conflict are, in some cases, enough to obtain and achieve some micro-modification on work organization, but this micro-modification come usually at a very high cost in terms of resources, time, expertise, mobilization in a context in which, as I said before, these resources are very rare. And there are exceptions linked to specific plant history and tradition, but I don't have the time to go into the detail of this. I will just jump to my conclusion and coming once again back to our analytical framework. I think that our results in our research shows that structural factors inherent to the firms, and especially those related to the path of techno-organisational innovation taken by the firms, influence the areas and scope for union action in response to these techno-organisational changes, and this is particularly evident when we compare FCA cases with Audi Volkswagen cases. In former trade union responses are oriented more in countering negative consequences in terms of work intensification and working condition, whilst in larger trade union action is more directed in strengthening worker position within the firms by obtaining new investments or obtaining professional training. Socio-political features and institutional factors also play a role, and especially seem to contribute to define the greater or lesser degree of openness of the structure of opportunities for unions, and in turn the structure of opportunities seem to interact with resources in shaping the depth and effectiveness of union responses. For instance, we have cases in which strong union power resources are coupled with favorable social-political institutional context, and so there are wide opportunities for union action, such as in the case of Lamborghini and Ducati. But we have also cases, and especially FCA, former FCA CNH cases, in which scarce union power resources are coupled with unfavorable social-political institutional context, and in these cases we find certainly the persistence of union action, but also we have to acknowledge its limited effectiveness. And finally, we have also one case, the Toyota case, in which the social-political environment is not particularly favorable, not particularly hostile. And in this case, I think it is important to raise the question of union strategic capabilities to use its resources to open new windows of opportunities, especially in the face of technological innovation. Our last slide is somehow to show our way forward in this research. And I will just explain this particular union that we have studied in our research is a particular one, actually. It's a very peculiar one because it has been one of the most radical metal worker union in Italian history, and especially during the first 2 decades of the 2000s, in a context in which trade union action was becoming more and more moderate. It was regarded as a kind of exception because it continued to maintain a very workerist-oriented culture with a very strong confrontational approach, both oriented to oppose company initiative, but also to oppose government initiative, since this union was also tried to try the path of social movement unionism. We raise the question of what remains of this exceptionalism today, since our cases located in the Emilia-Romagna region show at least the risk of tendencies towards form of managerial corporatism, while our FCA cases, while being more, this trade union approach being more confrontational in these cases, we also find a very sharp reduction in conflict, especially in strikes, and only the survival of forms of micro conflicts that are, as I said, highly costly in terms of human resources. So our final question now is an open question which we are trying to work right now, is do work-based attributes actually overcome union culture in shaping trade union representative action at workplace level? If yes, it is not something very new, actually. Already previous research has shown that the decline of class consciousness has led difference emerge between unions and factory, and also within the same factory and also within the same union and different factories. But we want to go somehow deeper in this problematic, somehow asking if and how does union strength shape somehow union strategy at the workplace level, especially in the face of digitalization. To summarize it, it happens that when unions have little power, they try to remain pure and they do not engage in negotiation with management, because they already know that they don't have the power to shape managerial action, while on the other side, where unions acknowledge their strength within a workplace, they are more inclined somehow to enter in negotiation with management because they know that they could have the power to shape management decisions and choices. So this is the way forward of our research. We're still going to further explore our materials in this direction, but that's it for now, and we thank you for your attention, and we look forward for a good and interesting discussion in our online discussion. Thank you very much.